Hey everyone, tonight we're stepping into a world of endless grasslands and thundering horses, of a people who lived under the open sky and built the largest contiguous empire in human history, and of the extraordinary individuals, warriors and merchants and scholars and survivors who lived through the most dramatic transformation the medieval world had ever seen. We're talking about the Mongol Empire, and it was far more complex, far more surprising, and far more human than most people realize. Before we begin, take a moment to subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And drop a comment telling me where in the world you're listening from and what time it is for you. Now dim the lights, get comfortable, and let's ease into tonight's journey together about to understand the Mongol Empire. You have to start with the steppe, the vast ocean of grass that stretches from the forests of Manchuria in the east to the borders of Hungary in the west, a distance of more than 5,000 miles, broken by rivers and mountain ranges, but fundamentally one continuous ecosystem that has shaped every people who have ever lived on it. The steppe is a world of extremes. In summer, the grass grows tall, and the sky is an overwhelming blue, and the air smells of wild onion and horse and the particular sweetness of sun-warmed earth. In winter, the temperature drops to 40 below, and the wind comes off the Siberian plateau without obstacle, and the steppe becomes one of the most hostile environments on Earth. The people who live on this steppe are nomads, not nomads in the sense of wanderers without purpose or direction, but nomads in the precise ecological sense of people who move with their animals to exploit the seasonal availability of pasture. They are expert managers of their landscape, moving in established patterns between summer and winter pastures, managing their herds of horses and cattle and sheep and camels with a knowledge of the land that is as sophisticated as any settled farmer's knowledge of his fields. Their whole culture, their social organization, their values, their religion, their art, their warfare is built around the horse and the requirements of pastoral nomadism. In the 12th century, before the rise of the man who will change everything, the Mongolian steppe is a landscape of constant small-scale warfare. The various tribes, Mongols, Tatars, Merkits, Naimans, Carats, and others raid each other's herds, steal each other's women, form alliances that last a season, and collapse at the first opportunity. There is no unified Mongol people. There is no Mongol identity that transcends the clan and the tribe. The politics of the steppe are the politics of the blood feud and the marriage alliance, of loyalty purchased and loyalty betrayed, of the strong man who can hold a coalition together and the moment when his death sends the coalition apart. Our three companions tonight are Bort, a Mongol woman of middle rank whose life spans the transformation of this steppe from a world of tribal warfare to the center of a world empire. A woman who survives capture, slavery, and the burning of her world and finds within herself a resilience that the Mongol ideal of the strong woman both demands and genuinely celebrates. There is Xiao Wei, a Chinese scholar and administrator from the Jin dynasty city of Zhongdu, modern Beijing, who watches his city fall to the Mongol armies and makes the pragmatic decision to serve the conquerors, becoming one of the Chinese officials without whom the Mongol administration of China would have been impossible. And there is Marco, Not Marco Polo, but a composite figure, a Venetian merchant traveling the Silk Road under the Pax Mongolica, the Mongol peace who finds in the empire's vast, protected trade routes the commercial opportunity of a lifetime, and in its people something that his European assumptions had not prepared him for. The 12th century steppe produces the man who will reshape the world in the person of Temujin, born around 1162 to a minor Mongol chieftain. His life beginning with the particular disadvantages of the steppe aristocracy fallen on hard times. His father poisoned by Tatar rivals when Temujin is 9. His family abandoned by their clan in the brutal logic of steppe politics, where a leader's followers owe loyalty to his power and not to his memory. The boy who will become Genghis Khan spends his adolescence in poverty and danger, learning the steppe's ruthless lessons about loyalty and betrayal, power and its absence, the difference between those who survive and those who do not. He is captured and enslaved. He escapes. He builds alliances carefully and with a patience unusual in a young man on the steppe. He fights. He wins. And gradually, over decades of warfare and diplomacy, he does what no one on the steppe has ever done before. He unites the tribes. The Mongol army does not fight the way its enemies expect it to fight, and this is perhaps its greatest single advantage. The armies of China and Persia and Russia and Hungary are organized around the expectation that a battle will be a collision of forces, cavalry charges, infantry lines, the pushing and breaking of formations. The Mongol army does something different. It maneuvers. It feigns retreat, drawing the enemy cavalry out of formation in pursuit, and then turns and destroys them piecemeal. It envelops. It uses its speed to surround an enemy force before that force understands it is being surrounded. It does not seek the decisive frontal engagement that European and Chinese military thinking treats as the goal of strategy. It seeks the destruction of the enemy army's ability to resist, by any means available, the feigned retreat. The Tulugma is the Mongols' signature tactical move and the one that most consistently destroys their enemies. A Mongol force engages an enemy army, fights briefly, and then turns and flees. The enemy cavalry, trained to believe that a fleeing enemy is a beaten enemy, gives chase. They pursue for miles, losing their formation, separating from their infantry, exhausting their horses. And then the Mongols stop, turn, and the pursuing cavalry finds itself facing a disciplined force on fresh horses and ground of the Mongols' choosing. It is not a trick that works only once. It works repeatedly, against enemy after enemy, because the instinct to pursue a fleeing enemy is apparently too deep to be. Overridden by the knowledge that the Mongols do this, the Mongols are also the first steppe people to master siege warfare, the great weakness of all previous nomadic armies, who could defeat field armies, but could not take walled cities. Genghis Khan addresses this by incorporating conquered peoples, specialists into his army, Chinese engineers who operate catapults and trebuchets, Persian engineers who design siege towers, people with specialized knowledge that the steppe does not produce. By the time of the Great Western campaigns, the Mongol army includes Chinese siege engineers, Persian astronomers, Uyghur administrators, and a dozen other categories of specialists, making it not just a cavalry force but a combined arms. system of extraordinary flexibility. The psychological dimension of Mongol warfare is as important as the military dimension, and it is deliberately cultivated. The Mongols offer every city and army they encounter a choice: surrender and be spared, resist and be destroyed. This is not a bluff. The cities that surrender are, in general, spared, their populations taxed and incorporated into the empire, their rulers replaced or confirmed according to their cooperation. The cities that resist are, in general, destroyed with a completeness that was clearly intended to be heard about in the next city. The population of Merv, one of the great cities of Central Asia, is reportedly massacred when the city resists. The population of Nishapur, same. The fate of these cities was known across the Islamic world within months. The next city that faced the Mongol demand for surrender made its calculation with full knowledge of what resistance meant. Zhao Wei is 12 years old when he first hears serious news of the Mongols. He is living in Zhongdu, the Jin dynasty capital, a city of perhaps 1 million people, one of the great cities of the world and a household of scholars and officials. His father a mid-level bureaucrat in the Jin administration, his own future mapped out in the examination system that has governed Chinese elite life for centuries. The examinations, the most rigorous meritocratic system in the world, requiring candidates to memorize and demonstrate mastery of the Confucian classics, are the path to office. And office is the path to everything that matters in the Jin world. Zhao Wei is good at this. He has been good at it since he could read, which was early. The news from the north, when it comes, is fragmentary and disturbing. Mongol cavalry raiding across the border fortresses falling, a Jin army defeated in the field, the Jin emperor making peace on unfavorable terms, paying tribute. The news arrives in Zhongdu as rumor first, and then as fact, filtered through the layers of bureaucracy and official communication that shape everything in the Jin world, softened by the natural tendency of any administration to present bad news as manageable. Zhao Wei's father reads the reports with an expression his son will remember for the rest of his life. Not fear exactly, but the particular stillness of a man recalculating everything he thought he knew. The position of women in the Mongol Empire is genuinely unusual for the medieval world, and understanding it requires setting aside both the Western, medieval template and the assumptions about nomadic cultures that settled peoples have always been prone to making. Mongol women of the senior ranks, the khatans, the senior wives and mothers of the ruling class, exercise a degree of authority and independence that has few parallels in contemporary China or Persia or Europe, and that is not merely tolerated but built into the structure of Mongol society. The practical basis for women's authority on the steppe is the same as the practical basis for everything on the steppe: necessity. When the men are away on campaign, which for much of the empire period means months or years at a time, the women run everything. They manage the herds. They conduct the seasonal migrations. They deal with disputes between households. They make decisions about trade and alliance that in settled societies would be reserved for male heads of household. A Mongol woman who cannot do these things is a liability. A Mongol woman who can do them superbly is an asset of incalculable value, and the culture recognizes this. The great Khatans of the empire exercise power on a scale that is startling. Torajing Khatan, the wife of Ogedei Khan, serves as regent of the entire empire for 5 years after her husband's death, conducting the business of government with a competence that the male nobles of the court find both necessary and uncomfortable. Sorkoktani Beki, the mother of Kublai Khan and his brothers, is described by contemporaries as the most intelligent woman in the world, and her management of her son's education and her family's political position during the turbulent years of succession disputes demonstrates a political intelligence that would be remarkable in any era. She converts to Christianity, she is Nestorian Christian, while ensuring that her sons are exposed to Buddhism and Islam and Confucianism. The pragmatic religious open-mindedness of the steppe applied to the strategic question of how to rule a multi-religious empire. Bort herself, in her later years, becomes the center of a household that is effectively a small court, the senior wife of the ruler of the world. Her position acknowledged by everyone who comes into her presence. Her advice sought by her sons when they face decisions they cannot resolve among themselves. She is not the public figure that her husband is. She does not command armies or issue proclamations. Her power is the power of the household, of the relationships and loyalties she has built over 50 years of marriage and motherhood, of the knowledge she has accumulated about every person of importance in the empire and their motivations and vulnerabilities. It is a different kind of power than the Khan's power, quieter and less visible, and in some ways more durable. The women of conquered peoples have a more complicated experience of the empire. The Mongol practice of taking women from conquered peoples as wives, as concubines, as servants is part of the standard practice of conquest that the Mongol world shares with most pre-modern military cultures. The women taken in this way have no choice in the matter and often no protection. And yet the Mongol Empire also, paradoxically, creates opportunities for women that the conquered cultures did not offer. The wives and daughters of Mongol officials have freedoms that Chinese or Persian women of comparable social position do not have. And over time, the cultural mixing of the empire produces hybrid households, in which the Mongol norms around women's authority blend with the norms of the surrounding cultures in ways that are impossible to predict or fully document. Borte's daily life in the years before and during the great campaigns is centered on the ger, the circular felt tent that is the basic unit of Mongol domestic life and one of the most ingeniously designed portable structures ever made. The ger is not a simple tent. It is a sophisticated structure of a latticed wooden frame covered with layers of felt. The felt itself made from the wool of the family's sheep, pounded and pressed and shaped into sheets of insulating material that keeps the interior warm in winter, and with the door open and the smoke hole at the top to create a draft tolerably cool in summer. It can be disassembled in an hour and loaded onto carts for the seasonal migration and reassembled at the new campsite with the same efficiency. The interior is precisely organized. The door always faces south, the hearth in the center. The family's sleeping and storage areas arranged around it in a layout that every Mongol recognizes and navigates without thought. The Mongol diet is built around the products of the herds, meat and dairy in forms that the steppe makes possible and that settled peoples find exotic. Dried meat, borts, pounded to powder and reconstituted with water, a concentrated food source that a warrior can carry for weeks without spoiling. Ereg, fermented maize milk, the great social drink of the steppe, mildly alcoholic, slightly fizzy, an acquired taste that Marco will describe with careful diplomacy as not entirely unpleasant. Dried curds, aruil, that last indefinitely and provide protein and fat on the march. The Mongol warrior's ability to sustain himself on these concentrated foods, without the supply train that agricultural armies require, is a significant part of his tactical advantage. He can move faster because he carries his food with him. The horse is the center of Mongol life in a way that is difficult to fully convey to people who have grown up without them. A wealthy Mongol family might own hundreds of horses. A warrior goes into battle with 3. 1 he rides, 2 he leads, rotating them to keep them fresh. He learns to ride before he learns to walk properly, the family legend goes. And while this is an exaggeration, it is not a large one. He sleeps with his horses nearby. He knows each one individually. He can assess a horse's condition and soundness with a glance. The Mongol relationship with the horse is not the relationship of a rider with a tool, but of a person with a partner. And the loss of horses, to weather, to disease, to enemy action, is experienced as a genuinely personal loss. Bort is an expert horsewoman, as all Mongol women of her rank are. She manages the family's herds. She knows the seasonal routes across the steppe that her grandmother knew and her grandmother's grandmother knew. Before that, the summer pastures in the high valleys, where the grass is rich and the flies are fewer. The winter camps in the sheltered valleys where the wind is broken by the hills and the animals can survive the cold. This knowledge, accumulated over generations, refined by experience, transmitted from mother to daughter and from father to son, is the steppe equivalent of the farmer's knowledge of his fields, and it is the foundation on which everything else is built. The religion of the Mongols before and during the Empire period is shamanism, a set of practices and beliefs centered on the shaman, the BO, who mediates between the human world and the world of spirits. The great sky god Tengri, eternal blue heaven, is the supreme deity, the source of the mandate under which the Khan rules. Genghis Khan and his successors consistently present their conquests as the will of Tengri, the mandate of heaven in its Mongol form, the earth goddess Edigan, the ancestor spirits who must be fed and propitiated, the spirit world that interpenetrates the physical world at every point, and that the shaman navigates on behalf of the community. This religious world is not exclusive. The Mongols encounter Buddhism, Islam, Christianity, Taoism, Confucianism as they expand, and their response to all of them is the same pragmatic curiosity that Genghis Khan's Yasa enshrined as policy dot, the Great Kurultai. The assembly of the Mongol nobility is the political institution of the steppe at its most formal. When a great Khan dies, the Kurultai must meet to choose his successor, and until the Kurultai meets and decides, the empire is technically without leadership. The requirement that all the senior princes attend means that armies halt in the field, campaigns are suspended, and the empire's enormous momentum pauses while the political process runs its course. This happens after Genghis Khan's death in 1227, after Ogeday's death in 1241, famously stopping the Mongol advance into Central Europe at the very moment it seemed unstoppable, and after subsequent deaths, each pause a moment when the world holds its breath and waits to learn who will control the largest empire in history. The Mongol Empire begins to fracture almost as soon as it reaches its maximum extent. This is not surprising. It is, in fact, the universal fate of empires built by conquest rather than by the slow accumulation of administrative capacity. And the Mongol Empire is the most extreme example in history of the former type. The empire is held together by the person of the great Khan and by the shared interest of the ruling family in its continuation. When the family begins to disagree about succession, as it does almost immediately, the question of who among Genghis Khan's sons and grandsons should rule producing conflicts that are sometimes resolved by negotiation and sometimes by war, the centrifugal forces begin to outweigh the centripetal ones. By the second half of the 13th century, the empire has effectively divided into 4 successor states: the Yuan dynasty in China and Mongolia under Kublai Khan, the Ilkhanate in Persia and Iraq under Hulag's descendants, the Chagatai Khanate in Central Asia, and the Golden Horde in the Russian steppe. These states are nominally still part of a single empire and maintain a degree of communication and commercial connection, but they fight each other over border territories and their rulers pursue independent foreign policies. The Ilkhanate converts to Islam. The Yuan dynasty adopts Chinese culture. The Golden Horde becomes culturally Turkic. Within a century of Genghis Khan's death, the empire he created has become 4 different things, each one shaped by the culture it conquered. Marco, returning to Venice after 17 years in the East, finds that his city has no framework for understanding what he has seen. The sheer scale of the Mongol world, its distances, its populations, its wealth, its variety, exceeds everything that the European imagination has prepared him to describe. He dictates his account to a romance writer named Rustichello da Pisa, while both men are prisoners in Genoa. Marco captured in a sea battle, Rustichello already there, and the book that results is initially received with skepticism. The cities Marco describes are too large, the populations too numerous, the wealth too great. His contemporaries call him El Milione, the man of 1,000,000 lies. He insists on his deathbed that he has told only half of what he saw. The legacy of the Mongol Empire is written in the world that came after it in ways that are not always visible. The Russian sense of isolation and difference. From Europe, the particular quality of Russian political culture that emphasizes centralized authority and the vulnerability of the state is partly a product of 250 years of Mongol rule, the Golden Horde's influence on the Russian principalities, shaping their political development in ways that historians still debate. The Ottoman Empire, which fills some of the political vacuum left by the collapse of the Ilkhanate in Persia, inherits Mongol administrative practices along with the territories. The Ming dynasty in China, which overthrows the Yuan, defines itself in explicit opposition to the Mongol period, but it inherits the unified China that the Mongols created by completing the conquest of the Southern Song, and the administrative geography of China today still reflects decisions made in the Mongol period. The Black Death, which travels along Mongol trade routes in the 1340s, reshapes Europe as profoundly as any political event, killing between 1/3 and 1/2 of the population, disrupting the feudal order, creating the labor shortage that gives surviving peasants new leverage over their lords, contributing to the social and economic changes that will eventually produce the Renaissance and the Reformation. The connection between the Mongol trade network and the European plague is one of the great unintended consequences in history. The empire that its builders intended to rule the world ends up, through the mechanism of disease transmission, reshaping the world it could not conquer. Marco, our Venetian merchant, composite figure of the dozens of European travelers who made the journey east under Mongol protection, sets out from Venice in the 1260s with the particular mixture of commercial ambition and genuine curiosity that characterizes the best medieval merchants. Venice is at this time the commercial capital of Europe, its wealth built on trade with the East, its merchants the most sophisticated commercial operators in the Western world. The Mongol Empire has done something that no previous political structure has managed. It has unified under a single authority the entire overland route from China to the Black Sea, a distance of 5,000 miles, protecting it with a postal system and a garrison network and a legal framework that makes long-distance trade safer than it has ever been. The Silk Road is not a single road. It is a network of routes shifting over time as political conditions change, always seeking the combination of safety and availability of supplies that long-distance travel requires. In the Mongol period, it is more accurately called the Silk Roads, multiple routes crossing Central Asia, some through the northern steppe, some through the cities of Transoxiana and Persia, all eventually converging at the ports of the Black Sea or the Persian Gulf, where the goods pass into the Mediterranean trade network. Goods travel the full length of this network only rarely. More commonly, they pass through multiple hands, a Chinese merchant to a Central Asian, middleman to a Persian trader to a Levantine, factor to a Venetian shipper, each link adding value and extracting profit. The YAM system. The Mongol Imperial Postal Relay is the infrastructure that makes the Pax Mongolica possible. Stations are placed every 20 to 30 miles along the major routes, each one stocked with fresh horses and provisions. An imperial messenger carrying the Khan's authority can cover 150 miles in a day, changing horses at each station, the messages of the empire moving at speeds that nothing in the contemporary world can match. The same infrastructure serves merchants and travelers who obtain the appropriate passes, the pesa, the bronze or silver or gold tablet that identifies the bearer as traveling under imperial protection. With a pesa, a merchant can requisition horses and food at the relay stations. Without one, he is on his own. Marco travels with a pesa obtained through Venetian commercial connections and finds that it opens the empire to him with a completeness that is both liberating and occasionally overwhelming. The sheer scale of the Mongol world is the first thing that strikes him. He has grown up in Venice, a city of 100,000 people that considers itself a great metropolis. The cities he passes through in Central Asia are larger. The cities of China are unimaginably larger. Hangzhou, the southern Song capital, may hold 1 million people, and Marco's descriptions of it, when he eventually returns to Venice and dictates his account, will be dismissed as fantasy by readers who have no frame of reference for a city that sized out the goods that move. along the Silk Road and the Mongol period represent the full range of what the medieval world produced and desired. Chinese silk and porcelain going west, Persian carpets and metalwork going east, Indian spices, pepper, cinnamon, cardamom, moving in both directions, Central Asian horses, the best in the world, going south to the armies of India and the courts of China, Russian furs going south and east, Venetian glass going east, Egyptian cotton going everywhere. The volume of this trade under the Pax Mongolica is greater than at any previous time, and its effects reach far beyond commerce. The ideas and technologies and plants and animals and diseases that travel with the goods reshape the world on both ends of the route, the plague, the Black Death, that will kill perhaps a third of Europe's population in the 1340s and 1350s, almost certainly travels along the Mongol trade routes. The bacterium Yersinia pestis, which causes bubonic plague, is endemic in the rodent populations of Central Asia. The Mongol trade routes bring it into contact with the dense populations of China and Persia, and then through the Black Sea ports into Europe. This is not a deliberate act of biological warfare, though there is one famous incident at the siege of Kaffa, where the Mongols are said to have catapulted plague-infected corpses over the walls, an early and terrible instance of the principle. It is simply what happens when you connect the world. The things that travel with people include the things that kill people. The Mongol campaign against the Jin dynasty of northern China is not a single campaign, but a series of campaigns, stretching over 2 decades, interrupted by other wars and the requirements of the steppe, political system that calls the Khan back to deal with internal matters. It begins in 1211 and ends in 1234, long after Genghis Khan himself is dead, with the final destruction of the Jin state. What happens in those decades is one of the greatest military operations in the pre-modern world, conducted against one of the most sophisticated and well-defended states in existence, across terrain and distances that would have defeated any previous nomadic army. China in the 13th century is not one state, but several. The Jin dynasty of the Jurchen people rules northern China from Jiangdu. The southern Song dynasty rules from Hanzhou in the south, technically independent, but a tribute payer to the Jin. The western Xia kingdom occupies the northwestern territories between the Mongol steppe and Jin China proper. The Mongols deal with these states in sequence, first subjugating the western Xia, then attacking the Jin, then eventually, under Genghis Khan's successors, conquering the southern Song in a campaign that will not be completed until 1279. The Conquest of China takes the better part of a century and involves military operations that range from steppe cavalry raids to amphibious assaults on river cities to the reduction of fortresses by siege. The siege of Jiangdu in 1215 is the moment that changes everything for Zhao Wei. He is now in his mid-20s, an educated man working in a minor administrative capacity in the city, unmarried, living in the family house that his father has occupied for 30 years. The Mongol army arrives outside the walls in spring. The city is prepared for siege. It has enormous walls, a large garrison, stockpiles of food. What it does not have is any realistic prospect of relief from outside. Because the Jin field armies have already been destroyed in the open campaigns. The siege lasts several months. The food runs out. Disease spreads. And then the Jin emperor does something that Qiu Wei and everyone else in the city finds incomprehensible. He abandons his capital, fleeing south with his court, leaving the city and its population to its fate. The fall of Zhongdu, which the Mongols partially burn and thoroughly loot, is a catastrophe from which the Jin dynasty never recovers politically. For Zhou Wei, it is the end of one world and the beginning of another. His father dies during the siege, of illness rather than violence, which in the mathematics of siege warfare counts as a mercy. His mother and younger siblings survive. The city survives, partially the population reduced, the government gone, the familiar order replaced by the unfamiliar order of Mongol occupation. Zhou Wei makes his calculation. The Mongols need administrators. They do not have enough literate people to run the territories they are conquering. A Chinese official who is willing to serve the new masters has a future. A Chinese official who refuses has no future at all, and no way to protect the people he is responsible for. He submits. He is tested, found competent, and put to work. The practical administration of conquered China by Mongol rulers is one of the great administrative challenges of the medieval world. And it is solved, to the extent it is solved, largely by Chinese and other non-Mongol administrators like Qiu Wei. The Mongols are superb warriors and superb pastoralists, but they have no tradition of the complex bureaucratic administration that a settled agricultural civilization of China's size requires. The tax system, the irrigation works, the granaries, the postal system, the courts, all of these require people who can read and write and calculate and understand the existing system well enough to make it function. The Mongols, to their credit, understand this. They employ the people who have this knowledge. They do not always understand what those people are telling them, and the opportunities for a competent administrator to shape policy through selective presentation of information are enormous, and Zhou Wei uses them. Kublai Khan, who will eventually become the great Khan and the ruler of China, is himself a figure transformed by the encounter with Chinese civilization. He grows up surrounded by Chinese advisors, reads Chinese history, becomes fascinated by Chinese culture in a way that his grandfather Genghis Khan, who spent his life on campaign and died on campaign, never was. The Yuan dynasty that Kublai establishes in China is simultaneously a Mongol dynasty and a Chinese dynasty. It presents itself in the Chinese tradition, uses the Chinese examination system, maintains Chinese court rituals. The Mongols who destroyed so much are in China ultimately absorbed by what they conquered, their descendants becoming more Chinese with every generation until the distinction between Mongol and Chinese is more genealogical than cultural. The unification of the Mongol tribes under Temujin, who receives the title Genghis Khan, meaning something like universal ruler or oceanic ruler, at the Great Kurultai Assembly of 1206, is one of the most remarkable political achievements in human history. It is not simply a military conquest. It is a restructuring of the steppe's social order from the ground up, a deliberate dismantling of the tribal system that has kept the steppe peoples fragmented for centuries, and its replacement with a new system of organization. that owes its loyalty not to blood, but to the Khan. The key innovation is the decimal military system, the organization of the army into units of 10, 100, 1,000, and 10,000 men, each unit commanded by an officer appointed by Genghis Khan himself rather than by tribal heredity. A unit of 1,000 might contain men from 10 different tribes. The tribal warrior who in the old system fought for his clan chief now fights for the Khan in a unit with men who are strangers to him, under a commander who has his position because Genghis Khan trusts him. This destroys at a stroke the basis of tribal fragmentation. You cannot defect to your tribe if your unit contains no one from your tribe. Genghis Khan's law, the Yasa, is the other pillar of his new order. It is not a written legal code in the way that Suleiman's canon or Roman law are written codes. It is a collection of precedents and decisions and principles, transmitted orally and maintained by memory, covering everything from military discipline to the treatment of prisoners to the protection of merchants and ambassadors. Several of its provisions are remarkable for their era. The Yasa guarantees freedom of religion throughout the empire, not tolerance exactly, but a deliberate policy of non-interference in religious practice that reflects Genghis Khan's personal pragmatism about matters he considered unknowable. It protects trade routes and merchants. It makes the killing of an ambassador a capital offense, a principle that the Mongols enforce with extraordinary violence when it is violated. Bort has known Temujin since they were children. She was betrothed to him at 9, left in her father's care while Temujin returned to his own people, and then collected by him at 16 when he came back to claim his bride. Their marriage is the foundation of everything that follows, though Bort herself would be the first to say that foundation is laid on complicated ground. Early in their marriage, she is captured by the Merkits, a rival tribe taking revenge for an old wrong, and held for months before Temujin rescues her with the help of his blood brother Jamaka and his patron Togrul Khan of the Carrots. The son born shortly after her return is named Joki, the guest, and the question of his paternity follows him, and Bort, and the entire question of the succession for the rest of their lives. Borte's position in the new Mongol order that her husband creates is one that has no equivalent in most contemporary civilizations. Mongol women of the senior wives' rank hold genuine authority. They manage the household, which on the steppe means managing the herds, the servants, the younger wives, and their children, the entire economic operation of the Ger encampment. They advise their husbands on political matters, and their advice is genuinely sought and genuinely considered. They hold their own property separate from their husbands. When their husbands are absent on campaign, which in Genghis Khan's case means most of the year for most of their married life, they govern the household and the household's territories with full authority. Bort is not a passive figure in her husband's story. She is one of its architects, the Mongol war machine that Genghis Khan assembles after 1206 is unlike anything the world has seen before. It is built on the foundation of the steppe warrior's skills, horsemanship from earliest childhood, archery, practiced daily, the ability to cover enormous distances quickly and to sustain that movement for weeks, but it adds to these a discipline and a tactical sophistication that transforms individual skill into collective power. The composite bow that the Mongol archer carries, built from layers of bone and sinew and wood, laminated together, has a draw weight and a range that exceeds any bow produced by settled peoples. Fired from horseback at a full gallop, it can penetrate armor at 150 meters. And the Mongol warrior carries 3 horses, rotating them constantly, allowing the army to move at speeds that its enemies consistently find impossible to believe until the Mongol cavalry arrives. The destruction that the Mongol conquests brought is real, and it was enormous. The cities of Central Asia, Merv, Nishapur, Samarkand, Balkh, cities that had been centers of Islamic civilization for centuries, cities of libraries and mosques and madrasas and markets and craft traditions accumulated over generations, were destroyed, some of them so completely that they never recovered. The population losses in some regions are estimated by modern historians at 50 to 70%, numbers that are uncertain, but that are consistent with the fragmentary evidence of the period. The irrigation systems of Mesopotamia, the networks of canals that had made the Tigris-Euphrates Valley one of the most agriculturally productive regions in the world since the time of Babylon, were damaged in the Mongol conquest and never properly restored. The agricultural capacity of the region declined and did not recover for centuries. The sack of Baghdad in 1258 under Hulagu Khan. Genghis Khan's grandson is the event that contemporaries and historians have most consistently identified as the defining catastrophe of the Mongol conquests. Baghdad is at this time the capital of the Abbasid Caliphate, the symbolic and intellectual center of the Islamic world, a city of perhaps 1 million people, the home of the House of Wisdom that has been the greatest center of learning in the world for 4 centuries. The last Abbasid Caliph, Al-Mustasim, refuses to submit. The Mongol army takes the city in 10 days of siege and then sacks it for 17 days. The caliph is executed, wrapped in carpets and trampled by horses, according to the Mongol method of killing a person of royal blood without shedding it. The scholars of the House of Wisdom are killed or dispersed. The books, a library that may have contained hundreds of thousands of manuscripts, are thrown into the Tigris, and the river, according to the sources, ran black with ink for days. And yet, the story of the Mongol conquests is not only a story of destruction, it is also, paradoxically, a story of transmission of ideas and technologies, and people moving across the connected world that the empire created in ways that would not have been possible in the fragmented world before it. The paper-making technology that China had possessed for 1,000 years reached Europe in the 13th century, traveling along the Mongol trade routes. Printing technology followed. Eventually, the blast furnace techniques of Chinese metallurgy influenced Persian and then European metal working. The mathematical and astronomical knowledge of the Islamic world, partly preserved by scholars who fled the Mongol advance, reached Europe through multiple channels and contributed to the scientific revolution of the 16th and 17th centuries. Jia Wei is, in his own person, an example of both the destruction and the transmission. He has watched his city burned and his father die and his entire world dissolved into the new order of Mongol rule. He has made his accommodation with that order, worked within it, used his position to protect what he could protect and preserve what could be preserved. He has spent 30 years as an administrator in the Mongol system, watching the empire change from the instrument of conquest it was under Genghis Khan into something more complex and more varied under his successors, watching Kublai Khan become more Chinese than Mongol, watching the empire begin to fracture into its component parts, each khanate going its own way, the unity of the first generation dissolving into the diversity of the third. What Xiao Wei has preserved, over 30 years of careful work, is a library. Not a physical library, those are too vulnerable, but a library of knowledge, copied and distributed. The texts of Chinese history and philosophy and medicine and agriculture reproduced and sent to multiple locations so that no single destruction can eliminate them. He has done this quietly, using his position in the administration to justify the copying work as official business when possible and funding it from his own resources when not. It is not heroism in the dramatic sense. It is the quiet heroism of the bureaucrat who understands that civilization is made of texts and that texts must be protected not with swords but with copies.